So we'll get into the conversation here, but just very quickly we'll go through a few things that we want to show from some of our research in hydrogen. We've probably now worked on over 50 different hydrogen projects over the last 4 or 5 years. We've covered a very broad range of things in and around hydrogen. There's a lot of interest in and around green hydrogen, but obviously the challenge is demand, right? Tamara put it really well, show me the offtake in the last panel, and then that's really the challenge with a lot of these green hydrogen projects is where is that offtake? And so right now, a lot of the interest in hydrogen is hinged on this forecast for what green hydrogen demand looks like. And all of those dots on the right side that you see are all estimates from different consulting firms, right? We ourselves, I think, are fairly optimistic there, saying that by the end of 2030, we should have somewhere between 33 to 46 million tons of global green hydrogen demand. We think that it's challenging, but we have in our work, especially with some of our clients who are developing green hydrogen projects, we have seen that there are segments where there is demand for green hydrogen, where customers are willing to pay a premium. But those are in small volumes, and you have to stitch together a lot of those customers to kind of put together sufficient offtake for a commercially viable green hydrogen project. So that's really the question, right? Is who is going to buy these volumes of green hydrogen? I talked about this a little bit, but obviously there's a lot of IRA incentives that make hydrogen quite competitive today. Blue hydrogen we think is cost competitive today. Green hydrogen could be cost competitive, we think, by 2025, assuming that there'll be further cost reductions in the capital costs for electrolyzers, PEM electrolyzers in particular. We think that further cost reductions in and around alkaline electrolyzers are going to be challenging, although we'll still see some. We did a very interesting piece of work interviewing 70 different stakeholders in the Chinese alkaline electrolyzer value chain to see how further cost reductions could occur. And a lot of that is really via adding more scale into alkaline electrolyzer assembly. So we are still seeing some progress in alkaline, but really the primary opportunity from a cost reduction point of view from our work is in and around PEM electrolyzers. I touched upon this a little bit, but in addition to the IRA support, there is support that is coming in from other regulatory and policy, other regulations and policies. So the renewable fuel standard, for example, it's considering pathways to approve for producing hydrogen via RNG, for example, put into, let's say, a steam methane reformer. There's this broader discussion around EPA trying to come up with the greenhouse gas power plant rule, which of course is going to be fairly litigious, but there's that discussion. And then finally, LCFS is also looking at new pathways to approve hydrogen as part of the LCFS. I talked about this a little bit, but we expect further cost reductions in and around PEM electrolyzers. So what's interesting is if you take a look at our work in hydrogen, 3 years ago we were doing work like this where we were saying, okay, what's going to happen to PEM electrolyzer costs, how is it going to fall, and so on and so forth. And today, if you look at the kind of work that we are doing, we are working for chemical companies that are making a small component that ends up in PEM electrolyzers, and we are trying to help them understand what does the competition for that look like. Are their competitors adding capacity, or are they going to likely add capacity before the actual demand for their customers' electrolyzers actually comes to the market? So those are the kinds of fairly granular questions that a lot of the supply chain in and around green hydrogen is grappling with, and that's where a lot of our work today is focused in. We continue to do work around like, okay, what is the share of hydrogen that will be in the energy mix and all of that, but I think the interest is now shifting more towards making investments that will develop out the supply chain for a lot of these projects. The challenge, of course, is there's a lot of green hydrogen projects out there. that have been proposed, and the issue though is that a lot of them are in fairly early stages in terms of life cycle, right? We don't really have them advance into the FID stage. The share of projects that have taken FID continue to be small. So that's a little bit of the context in terms of what we see in and around hydrogen. Very interested in perspectives here. Markus, happy to have you back here. Thanks again for supporting the ADI forum. We know Hoerbiger well because of the opportunity that we have had to serve you over the years, but a lot of our clients don't know, so we'd like you to maybe start with that a little bit, and then Chendhil, I'll come to you. Liquide is a lot better, well-known company, but maybe Markus, could we start with you?
Thank you, Uday. Hoerbiger is, let's say the compression division of Hoerbiger is a supplier of components and systems of compressor valves, rings and packings, control system and services. And I think it's fair to say that we globally lead the market in that type of technology. Now, why are we sitting and why are we so interested in hydrogen? First and foremost, every time somebody mentions the word hydrogen, there's usually a reciprocating compressor not far away, because it's one of, I would say, the best fitting technology for that molecule. And so in that we have been supplying, especially in the refining and chemical side of the hydrogen, our technology since decades. With this new opportunities coming up with green hydrogen, as you mentioned, and potentially using hydrogen in mobility applications for heavy-duty vehicles, we have decided kind of like 3 years ago to make a step further and to develop together with Ariel a purpose-fit compressor for those type of applications, 500 bar, supporting fueling applications. And that's why our interest on hydrogen has actually, I would say, reached another dimension, as it always had been in Hoerbiger.
And how is that effort going, Markus? We talked about this a little bit at the last ADI forum as well, and how is that effort going? Where does that stand today?
So right now there's the first 2 applications going in pilot testing at bus fueling stations. All of that is currently in Europe. Mm-hmm. We just discussed before the US dynamics and the market developments here in America are of high interest for us. And I think with the speed that markets here in the US are gaining, the US can overtake Europe very easily, very soon.
When you say that, do you mean more around industrial applications for hydrogen, or do you think even in mobility applications?
I think so too, in mobility applications. But so what we see right now is a shift in focus of that industry that is building up, and I think that's favoring market dynamics in the US much more. A little bit away from trying to build small stations for passenger cars. Understanding that the dynamics in trucks, buses, ferries, rail, actually in all of the countries where there's not so much cargo going across with railroads, it's going to get much more momentum. And I think that's favorable here in the US, the environment.
That's very interesting. We've done some other work where we've looked at what fuels are most likely going to be impacted first because of hydrogen, and a lot of it is speculation, but it is simulation and analysis, and all the work that we do tells us that diesel is going to be the fuel that's going to be impacted the most, even without heavy-duty trucking and hydrogen picking up. So I think what you're telling us kind of resonates and matches with that.
And there's some, I would say, some interesting user experiences of logistic companies and truck companies. Now, if they want to write a compelling ESG strategy, they have to deal with the vehicles because that's their main asset, what they move.
That's an interesting point. Chendhil, everybody knows Air Liquide, but it would be interesting for us to know a little bit around hydrogen, what Air Liquide's working on, and there's some very interesting things that you guys are working on. So maybe give us a little bit of perspective there.
Sure. Thank you, Uday. Thanks for the invitation. Hello, everyone. I'm Chendhil Periasamy, Vice President, Air Liquide, Hydrogen Energy and Mobility. Within the energy transition space, I focus on carbon intensity management as well as off-road mobility markets like maritime, aviation, and trains. So, as you said, most of you are familiar with the Air Liquide. In case if you're not aware, Air Liquide is a world leader in gases, technologies, and services for industry and health. And we provide a number of gases from oxygen to nitrogen to carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and everything to many of our customers in chemical space, energy space, oil and gas, metals market, and so forth and forth. And with respect to the hydrogen space, very specifically, we've been in a hydrogen space for over 60 years, providing hydrogen for mainly our chemicals and petrochem type of customers. Within that hydrogen space, particularly in the US, we have invested over $1 billion in the past several years, and $6 billion globally, and then we have announced another $10 billion in the coming years, and focusing on the hydrogen and energy transition markets. And so we're a global company, and particularly in the US, we are about 20,000 people, and we are in every state, and we have about 1,300 locations in all the states there. And particularly from Air Liquide point of view, we believe that there is a value in all forms of hydrogen. So we focus our investment, we focus our activities on all forms of hydrogen wherever it makes sense in terms of the local energy available. And look forward to talking to you more and give you some examples.
So specifically, so your role, one of the areas of focus is specifically around mobility. So can you talk a little bit about what Air Liquide is doing for hydrogen and developing applications for hydrogen in mobility?
Yeah, clearly mobility is a great market application for hydrogen. That's emerging as a really viable market opportunity there, both from the marketing point of view as well as from the government and policy perspective. You talked about LCFS, IRA earlier. Mm-hmm. Those are all prioritizing heavy-duty mobility market development. So I can give you a couple of examples on the mobility side, what we are doing in Air Liquide. So the first one that I would like to suggest is we started up a new 30 ton per day liquid hydrogen plant in Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, about almost 2 years now. And then that is very specifically focusing on the mobility market, supplying hydrogen for the mobility market, particularly in California, and that is able to produce low carbon hydrogen there. So that's our largest liquefier, 30 ton per day liquefier there.
But this is, you are piping gas into a liquefier in Las Vegas and then liquefying it, but the application is in and around mobility applications.
Correct.
But it's still like gray hydrogen coming from an SMR somewhere, or?
So it is an SMR, which has the ability to use RNG.
Okay. Oh, RNG. Okay.
Both,
okay.
Both CCS and RNG. It can do that. But in the context of LCFS, then we use RNG.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, how do you see the mobility market in the US? And we'll come to Europe here, but I'm curious, how do you see that? Do you need a pretty strong policy scaffold like LCFS, or do you see opportunities to develop that market without some of that support?
I think with still the mobility market is in a very early stage of development. Right. Okay, so very early stage of development. At this stage, certainly we could use all the support from from policy perspective, from investment from the company's perspective. I think all of them are needed. I think they recently announced the hydrogen hubs from the DOE. I think it is a great example of how it's being viewed by the DOE and how DOE is looking to support that. So the intent of the hydrogen hubs are really to support the heavy-duty mobility market. So with that investment, the hydrogen hub program in place, the companies are joining forces and the companies are putting their investment in there. And then that's a way to start the mobility market. Then with the IRA around the PTC and all those things, if we can get the final guidance correctly defined, and then that's actually a great starter for the mobility market, in my view.
That's a good point. Maybe I'll come back to you on some of that policy stuff. But Markus, in Europe, how do you characterize the mobility market when it comes to hydrogen?
Very similar, very early stage.
Okay.
So when we say product is ready, we're getting excited. Still, that technology is much further down out as the other panels that we've seen before. RNG is available. Hydrogen is going to build up. What we see in Europe, though, is that I would say the industry has made 2 steps in the last year. And those steps are most of the companies that have shown interesting presentations and PowerPoints last year have now started to move and to act. And I've mentioned that before. A few weeks ago, one of the first large companies in Europe, it's Liquide and Total, have not only announced but have started their joint venture being operational, with a clear path to build 100 or more than 100 heavy-duty hydrogen fueling stations in parts of Europe. And there are others out like Phillips 66 and those companies. The second thing what I would say has really changed, and you can see that in conferences and in exhibitions, is that the suppliers, the companies that are needed to build technology for that infrastructure are there and trying to innovate and spend money in making components fit for high pressure hydrogen. And that has changed in Europe, and I think so too here in the US.
So essentially the supply chain is kind of responding and preparing. They feel at least some degree of confidence that this industry will pick up and the market will evolve where there'll be business for them.
I would say so, and you can see the not only that these conferences double and triple in size every year, but also when you see which companies are there and from the supply base, it's pretty much all of the supply base that is needed, where there's companies working on providing technology for that type of business.
Yeah, I just want to remind our conference team that Markus is talking about doubling or tripling the conference size next year. So,
but I gotta say, it's doubling minimum from last year with your conference, right? I mean, this audience is fantastic.
Thank you, Markus. Appreciate that. Chendhil, we were talking about this policy, right? I mean, there's quite a bit of uncertainty right now. Everybody is focused on IRA, what the rules will say, whether it is around additionality, deliverability, location matching, all of that stuff. Is that, I mean, earlier you talked about how Air Liquide is investing quite a bit of money, right? Billions of dollars, maybe $1 billion here in the US and more in Europe. But is some of that capital investment subject to what the clarity around some of the IRA incentives look like, or do you think it is independent of that?
Well, it's in a way it's linked. I mean, I think because we are we're part of 6 of the 7 DOE hydrogen hubs, and then there is production tied to it. There is an investment tied to it. Then of course we would like to have clarity on it. I mean, like I said earlier, this market is really in the very early stage. At this early stage, I think it is important to have flexibility and clarity on the flexibility. I think both are essential. I think that's what we seek, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the audience here, they would have submitted the comments as well.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what we are trying to do as well. We want to understand, can we have flexibility on it?
Yeah.
In all of them, from deliverability to the additionality to template, all of that. We would like to have flexibility, even that's on the renewable electricity side, and also on the RNG side also. We were seeking clarifications.
Yeah, no, sure. I think that makes sense. Chendhil, Air Liquide has a very good view of the broad hydrogen value chain, right? Right from production through transmission, through distribution. I mean, Air Liquide acquired Airgas, which has a very strong packaged gas distribution business. So you have a very good perspective of the entire value chain, right? When you think of hydrogen's applications, both in maybe more from a mobility point of view, right? Probably the distribution part is not as critical for industrial use of low carbon hydrogen, but from a mobility point of view, I guess where are the pain points, right? So if we were to imagine that we wake up tomorrow morning and hydrogen has 10% market share in mobility, right? What are the things that we need to fix today to make that happen from a overall value chain, supply chain point of view?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if we look at a very matured market, so what we need is three things. One is the production, and you have the end use, as previous panel pointed out. So production, end use, and then the connective infrastructure. So that's the three pieces that need to happen. Mm-hmm. Then if you look at on the production side, it depends on what technology. Okay, so the fossil-based technologies are already mature. So we've been running for many decades. The challenge there is on how we can make it low carbon, the use of carbon capture, all those things. Then on the electrolytic side, the cost on both on the capital equipment as well as on the power is a little bit on the highs. Those still need to come down. Right? But then more importantly, on the connective infrastructure. Okay? So do we transport liquid? Do we transport gases? How long we transport? All those things we need to optimize to the end users. So where is the offtake? And which customer? All those things that we need to figure out. Then those are all the pieces that we are working together. As one example that I can point out is we recently announced an MOU with the Trillium. So Trillium is a Love's Travel Stop. So renewable arm of Love's Travel Stop. So we announced an MOU there with the intention of developing heavy-duty mobility market in the US.
So what would that look like? Like if you were to take one of the existing truck stops by and try to reconfigure that into to make it hydrogen ready, right? What does that look like? I don't know if you have an estimate of what it costs in terms of capital, or maybe if you can at least describe from an engineering point of view, right? What are some elements that would be interesting to know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. From an engineering point of view, there's some challenges in terms of how you can fit the hydrogen into the existing refueling station. Okay, not all the locations could fit because you need to have all the distance and everything to be covered. Okay, all those things will need to be there. But if the location works out, existing locations can be converted into hydrogen refueling station locations, clearly. And then that can serve, and especially if it is on a major route where you have a lot of access to fleet, and then it's a great opportunity.
So, Markus, for those kinds of applications where you're taking, let's say, a truck stop, or you're trying to put a refueling station on a major truck corridor, right? I'm assuming that's all going to be liquid hydrogen-based fueling, or do you see do you see a role for gas-based hydrogen refueling in those applications?
So that's definitely one of the things that need to be seen and proven. I would say right now the the industry tends to, I think the industry will go into that direction that gives the most robust system at the lowest cost, least complicated. And right now, the early adopters of logistic companies would say, look, if you can get us 500 bar, like that's 7,000 psi gaseous hydrogen, the reach is enough, as long as there's enough infrastructure in terms of the fueling stations. It's not, because the advantage of hydrogen, if it is on zero emission mobility, is that the truck is refilled in 10 minutes. It's not like 3 hours or similar times on batteries. So the 350 bar in a tank is actually giving sufficient reach at anticipated lowered cost. The higher the pressure, the more liquid it's going to be, the more costly it's going to be, and the less technology will be available for that. So, and in that sphere of range versus ease of adoption, I think that's going to be the game that's going to be played in the next couple of years.
Does it make, sorry,
and if I may add what Markus said, I think the main reason why liquid hydrogen is more attractive is really for the ease of transportation. Okay, how quickly we can get to give you some numbers. If you're transporting liquid, you can carry 4 tons in one load. But where if you're transporting gases, you can only carry like 400 kg. So you're already 10 times you're saving on the cost on the transportation. So that's why we look at really what is the best route, and then what is the best way to transport, and then hence liquid becomes an obvious choice.
I completely agree with that. To transport it, the liquefaction will be a very, very interesting option. In the vehicle, I think it needs to be seen.
Yeah, the refueling, from a refueling point of view, I think that's, I think you were talking about it more from a refueling infrastructure at the point of refueling, while I think, Chendhil, what you're talking about is more if you want to move large volumes from point A to point B. Absolutely. Makes sense. If you had a magic wand and you could accelerate the development of some of these technologies, and you could just pick one technology or one part of the value chain, what would that be? Where would you want to see greater progress?
One free wish?
Yeah, one free wish.
Maybe I have to. I mean, on the
we can do a study to help you prioritize them.
On the production side, certainly we're looking forward to lowering the cost on the capex on the electrolytic side, particularly. Okay, so that's something that could be helpful. And then on the infrastructure, so wider adoption of infrastructure, refueling station, transportation, storage. That's where additional improvement needs to be done. Not so much on the technology development side, but it's more on the implementation.
Just building out the infrastructure.
Building out large-scale infrastructure.
Okay.
Then if we have those two, and then that's going to really kickstart the offtake.
Yeah. Markus?
I would offer on the vehicle side and the fuel cell side, and maybe that's a little bit of a European view, and I'm not sure, I really don't know how it's here in the US, but
fuel cell, definitely utopian view. I don't know, the discussion seems to have migrated a lot away from fuel cells, at least in the US. I don't know how the picture is in Europe.
So for our product, it can be combustion engine too, it doesn't really matter. So what we see in Europe is that for new vehicles, operators want to go to fuel cell, and they become available. From a European perspective, what we see is that the European truck manufacturers having a hard time to stay in the race versus what you see coming from Asia, from Korea, from Japan, and even from China in terms of cost competitive functioning fuel cells right now.
So we did some work where we were looking at where hydrogen can end up in mobility, and it felt to us like in Asia, we were seeing a lot of applications for mass transit, buses and all of that. And all of that to a large extent was fuel cell based. So I would imagine that from a technology point of view that they are further along. But Chendhil, I guess you said earlier that your Air Liquide likes all colors of hydrogen, and that makes sense to me. But are you, I guess, what are you doing in and around blue and green hydrogen?
At least our view is, like I said earlier, all forms of hydrogen, they have a role to play in the decarbonization. So we look at all of them, and we look at what's the best available energy source locally, and then how we can produce hydrogen, and how we can supply in an optimal way to the customer. So that's our view. And then to give example, as I mentioned earlier, there is a plant that we have in North Las Vegas that's operated based on fossil, natural gas based. And then we have another facility in Baconcourt near Montreal, where we have abundant hydroelectric power available, and then so we're taking advantage of that. Then we are running a PEM electrolyzer. So that's one of the largest operating electrolyzers, 20 megawatt electrolyzers there. So we are producing 8 tons per day of liquid hydrogen there. So really, what is the best available energy source, and how we can produce hydrogen from there, and then we switch around to look at the carbon intensity. So what is the carbon intensity of the molecule that we are providing? And then we're very glad to see from the DOE that they're adopting all the carbon intensity based methodology in evaluating for the PTs and everything. So ultimately, what matters is what is the CI that you are going to be producing at the end of it.
So you said you're operating a PEM electrolyzer. I'm curious what drove your decision to use a PEM versus, let's say, an alkaline electrolyzer. I don't know if you can share that, but do you have a point of view on electrolyzer technology at this stage, or it's too early to talk about that?
Well, we are working heavily on PEM electrolyzers. We have announced a joint venture with Siemens Energy in Germany for producing gigawatt scale electrolyzers. So as I mentioned, the 20 megawatt electrolyzer, that's from Hydrogenics Cummins, and then the one we will have based on the Siemens Energy. So we are planning a 200 megawatt PEM electrolyzer project in France. Okay. So we're looking at PEM electrolyzer predominantly. Yeah.
Okay. Markus, as you go about looking at opportunities and applications for hydrogen for your compressor technology, as well as part of broader Hoerbiger's offerings and initiatives, any point of view on the technology type for electrolyzers? What are you seeing gain traction? And any perspectives there?
I think it will depend on the sizes of the electrolysis. If it is like smaller, more decentral type of electrolysis, so I think the PEM technology is the one that industry waits to scale larger and take market share from alkaline, just because of the fact that the pressure, the output pressures are higher, and it makes a lot of difference for compression equipment if you get 20 bar versus 1 or 2 bar outlet pressure. So I think that's and various other factors will favor the development of the PEM electrolysis. So interestingly, still a lot of projects go with alkaline, because especially on these infrastructure projects, the amount of lifetime guarantee and durability at the moment there's higher promises on alkaline.
Yeah, alkaline has a better, or at least some track record to show and discuss, while I think PEM is still.
But I would say everybody really waits for PEM to scale up and be the dominant player in that market.
Yeah. Let me open this up for questions from the audience. Okay, lots of Mo. Let's start with Mo here. There's some advantages of taking the table at the front.
Yeah, I was waiting a whole day for this. Yes, Mohammed Islam Mo from S&B, Engineers and Constructors. Question, the levelized cost of hydrogen, right, even with the IRA tax credit, production credits for, say, blue hydrogen, is close to the production cost of gray hydrogen. Very close. Okay. Yeah. But for green hydrogen, even with the production tax credit, I would say it's about 2.5 times more expensive than gray hydrogen. So my question to the panel is that who is going to pay for this, even after the credit is given? Is it the end producers? I mean, off-takers? Are they going to pass it on to their customers? I mean, what's your experience to date with green hydrogen offtake?
Well, at the moment it's in a really early stage, and logistic companies, at least in Europe at the moment, they do get, for instance, exemptions from rail fees, from highway fees, to balance that a little bit out. I even would say, I think even on the mid-run, in countries where there is natural gas available at low cost, blue hydrogen will take a large share also in the future portfolio, especially here in the US. Now, when you talk about Europe, in Europe there's not much natural gas available. Well, it can come with LNG, but you know the cost then, which is much different. There, I think the game will be how to get the cost for green hydrogen down as quickly as possible. The logistic companies know that they run under tight margins, and I think the willingness to spend more dollars for the fuel is very, very limited on the long run.
Yes, that's my question, really, because if you look at the production of green hydrogen, right, say it's $12, not liquefied, right, $12 per kilogram. You get $3 back, right, so it's $9 per kilogram, which is significantly higher than $2 that people are looking at. $2 plus liquefaction, so that's $2. So that's a big difference, right? It's a big gap. So I understand the mobility people might be willing to pay a little bit more, but we're not talking about little bit, we're talking significantly more. So I don't know what Liquide, for example, is saying that.
Yeah, I think that is the challenge. I mean, your point is very valid. That is the biggest challenge. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is, if you look at the mobility market, parity with the diesel, right? So in comparison with diesel, you got the fuel component, but then you also have the vehicle component. So we're only talking about the fuel, and there's also the vehicle component also. Okay, so together, combining all of that, we're trying to achieve the parity. Okay? It is hard, really. Then, and one way to look at that one is whatever the energy mix makes sense. So if we consider in the Gulf Coast region, bringing it out of the fossil-based, low carbon hydrogen with a lower carbon intensity makes sense here. Then maybe renewable electricity-based project could make sense from maybe Pacific Northwest or upstate New York. It could make sense there, but it really depends on the region. And then ultimately, we are trying to achieve the diesel parity. It's hard.
So, I have one question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
See, what I was seeing in one of the slides that was presented at the start, it was showing the cost comparison between the levelized cost of hydrogen when you use PEM versus the alkaline electrolyzer. Now, my question is that when somebody looks at the LCOH, and normally these the agreements are signed, let us say, for 20 years, 15 years, or 20 years. Does somebody take into account the cost of replacement of these stacks over a period of time?
Yes, they do. Yeah. So I can talk to you about some of the LCOH work that we were showing. Right. We make assumptions around the lifetime of the stacks. We make assumptions around O&M, replacement, how many stacks we use. We take into consideration learning curves that you'll see around the lifetime of these stacks. So it's a fairly thorough assessment based on everything that we know today.
And what do you think the lifetime for a PEM versus alkali? What is the replacement cycle?
I can get you more details on that. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get you more information on that, at least from our models.
Okay. Thank you.
Question?
Richard?
I'm Richard Barber with Waukesha Gas Engines, and so appreciate y'all's time today and very interesting subject. So y'all perked my ears when you start talking about compressors and compression. So I'm curious, hydrogen compression is not new, right? It's used very widely on the downstream side of the business. How is current compression technology for hydrogen different from what you're describing for your applications?
So the challenge for mobility applications is that the pressures are relatively high. 7,000 psi, some go up to 14,000 psi, and if it goes into fuel cells and not into combustion engines, then the cleanliness requirement of the fuel cells will require non-loop compression, which adds another level of complexity. And then there's one thing about some of the current designs don't like so much. It's not, and much in contrast to typical oil and gas operation, where the compressor in essence is running day in and day out. They have a lot of start-stop operations, and so those three elements, they give a challenge for the design of the compressor. So you see today already hydrogen stations and hydrogen compression applications on lower volumes, and the reciprocating compressor, we believe, has the potential to bring the durability that the oil and gas industry is used from compression equipment also into that market, where currently the runtimes are okay for the pilot projects that they have, but maybe are not okay for a full deployment of that technology.
So, if I may comment on Mo's comment earlier, I think your numbers that you stated are maybe relevant for Texas or some kind of average globally, and I think those kind of let's say comparisons are mostly relevant if you are talking about sort of capturing 50% of the market or something like that. Then you want to compare average prices on natural gas and average prices on power. But this is not really what we're looking for in the green sector right now. We're looking for capturing maybe between 1% and 5% of the market. So for us, it's much more relevant to look at what are the prices in the places where we can compete. And for example, this Bécancour, that's an excellent example. It's right next to a hydropower station. So I think this is how we'll see the green technology develop. It will develop initially in areas where it makes sense, and then power prices will come down, probably as you predicted, Uday, and then we'll see gradually a larger and larger part of the energy coming from green power. But right now, the focus is on identifying the places where it actually does make sense.
So this question is for maybe Chendhil. This is Prasenjit from ExxonMobil. We obviously are very bullish on hydrogen and mobility as well, but as all the discussion is pointing out, we struggle to see the economics. And I think I agree with the last comment that you need to activate the step before you can talk about large-scale penetration. Now, both of your comments were centered around blue and green as the way to go. Is there a third way to look at the same problem where you have the infrastructure already available through the LNG value chain, but it doesn't have the CO2 footprint that a typical SMR would have? Could pyrolysis be a way to look at the mobility sector and that solves the current challenges that both gray and green hydrogen have?
Yeah, I mean, It's an option. Clearly, I think it's an option. It'll work. There are some companies developing that work. In my personal opinion, is that the challenges of handling the carbon, solid carbon. I think that's the biggest challenge there. It is a lot easier to deal with CO2. You can sequester, use it. There are multiple ways that we can handle, and there are only very few ways that we can handle solid carbon. Okay, then but if there is a way to monetize that solid carbon, and then there is a project there. Okay, and then that also needs a fossil. And then you got to have the fossil natural gas available, and then in the same place where you can monetize the solid carbon, then that's clearly where that project makes sense.
Well, I think we'll wrap this panel up here. I want to thank again Chendhil and Markus for joining us. Let's give them a big hand, please. So, great panel on CCUS. My colleague Maria Lopez is going to moderate that panel session. There's a break after that, but you've got to stick around. There's 2 really good panels coming up, one on innovation and the last one on energy transition infrastructure. Thanks again.